Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, and at least for the moment, this is Finster. Yes, there she is. She's going to join me for this video. At least we'll see how long she wants to stay, right? Yeah? Good girl. Yeah, here to talk to you about 16 non-operatic Italian masterpieces I couldn't live without. I really couldn't. You know, we've done operas and we've done choral music, and so we've talked about a certain amount of Italian composers, but there is such a huge body of musical literature, especially if you include sacred music, choral music, that is Italian, that gets much less attention. And it's wonderful. Oh my, it's so wonderful. And here's my list, and I'm very curious to see yours because there's just some great stuff here. You ready? We begin in the late Renaissance, early Baroque period, really Reformation, really Counter-Reformation if you want to be strictly historical. Palestrina, Canticum, Canticorum, Salomonis, the Song of Songs. An absolutely gorgeous piece. You know, Palestrina wrote 30 trillion masses, and some people think they all sound the same. I mean, they sort of do, they sort of don't. But this is a piece that is sui generis, more or less, in his output, and I love it. I think it's absolutely exquisitely beautiful. So there you go, the Song of Songs. What a great place to begin with Italian music, which of course is the birthplace of song. And there we go, yes. Okay, good girl. Yes, you're a good girl. Let's see, Monteverdi, Vespers. Oh gosh, what a great work that is. I mean, isn't it just amazingly, incredibly fabulous? Discovering the Monteverdi Vespers, along with Orfeo, which is sort of the first opera, is really a wonderful moment in my life. Oh my God, where is she going? Okay, down on the floor. So there's that. Sort of a rocky start to this chat. Sorry, folks. But I figured, you know, we should at least try to include my daughters where we can. So the Monteverdi Vespers, yes, an astonishing masterpiece that is so haunting and so beautiful and so also special in its way. One of the great achievements of Western civilization, and I just can't get enough of it. So, and it's Italian. You know, when people think about Italian, they think about like Rigoletto, you know, La Donna Mobile. Yeah, well, of course they should. It's one of the great tunes in the history of Western civilization. But yes, there is much more to it than just, you know, 19th century opera, however fabulous that is, and it is. Corelli, his Concerti Grossi. Yes, Concerto Grossi I wrote here about. It's Concerti Grossi Opus 6. Others of you have mentioned those, talking either about works for string orchestra or concertos or things like that. But they are epochal works in the history of instrumental music, and oh, so beautiful all by themselves. Pergolesi, the Stabat Mater. I mean, that's his signature work. I mean, everybody adores it, and rightly so. It's for soprano and strings. It's a sensitive, delicate, but at the same time passionate and exquisitely beautiful setting of a wonderfully sad and musical text. A fantastic work by a composer who died very, very young. I wonder if some of you remember, there was a science fiction story, I forget what it was called, but I was a big sci-fi buff when I was growing up, and I had all these anthologies, and one of them was about how these people go back in time and they get Pergolesi, because he was like 26 when he died. And they decide to bring him back into modern times and fix him, cure him of whatever killed him. And then, you know, he'll stand back. They would stand back and watch him create all the masterpieces that unfortunately were not written because of his untimely death. So they get in their time machine or whatever they do, and they go and they find him and they snatch him and they bring him back and they clean him up and inoculate him and cure him and make him well. And what happens? He becomes a drug addicted rocker type who dies of an overdose like minutes later. You know, just a few, he doesn't write any masterpieces at all. He just dissipates his life and drops dead, exactly as happened originally. It's a fantastic story. Absolutely marvelous. But anyway, Pergolesi Stabat Mater, thank God we have it. And it's absolutely wonderful. Then we've got Vivaldi. Oh, of course, L'Estro Armonico, Opus 3. Another really historically important and just for itself gorgeous series of violin concertos. We all know them because Bach transcribed a bunch of them for keyboard, or his concerto for four harpsichords particularly. Not really to his advantage in my view, but that's okay. They are splendid works. And Vivaldi, of course, gets very little serious attention and from people who tend to regard him as a lesser cousin of the serious Baroque guys who are living up north in Germany. And it's not fair. Not fair at all, in my view. It's great music is great music, period. And we've got Rossini. Well, I could pick some of his piano works, which are just marvelous. I mean, any of them are just fantastic. But I chose the Petite Messe Solonnelle, which some of you have also mentioned too, because it is an unalloyed masterpiece. It's delightful. It's completely sui generis in its original scoring for piano and harmonium and small choir and soloists. It's just a delight, and it's such a beautiful and touching, truly touching setting. Rossini regarded it as his last sin of old age, and maybe his last shot at eternity. But wow, what a great piece! And it's not so petite. I mean, it's as long as the Missa Solemnis or something like that. It's a big piece, maybe longer, and tremendously varied and full of color and variety and fabulous tunes, and the work of an immensely experienced composer who's closing out his life with both a smile and a prayer. And it doesn't get any better than that. After Rossini, Sgambati, Symphony No. 1. Now, the 19th century Italian symphonists, I mean, there aren't too many of them. There's Sgambati, there's Martucci, but Sgambati's symphonies, there are two of them, are really lovely works. Beautiful works, full of good thematic material, wonderfully scored and intelligently structured, and gosh, they're a joy. And they're not known. They're not known at all, which I find kind of shocking, probably just because they're Italian. Ildebrando Pizzetti, Oedipus Rex, his 3 symphonic preludes. Well, there is actually an incredibly long Italian title to this piece, which is like Tre Preludi Sinfonici di Edipo Re di Sophocles or something. I don't know. It's a whole long thing. But this is a beautiful triptych of 3 interludes, which was actually the first piece of music I ever played in an orchestra, of all things, because it's written for a perfectly standard symphony orchestra, double winds, the usual brass. I was the only percussion aside from timpani. It's just cymbals, and really a lovely work, a beautiful work that doesn't get played, but it's been recorded a few times, thank goodness, and it's well worth getting to know. Pizzetti was a charming composer, he didn't write a lot of heavy duty big stuff, but his music is in the Respighi, Casella, Malipiero crew. He was one of those guys. Ghedini. We're going to talk about a bunch of these. Oh, speaking of Ghedini, yes, Architetture, his concerto for orchestra. It's called Architecture. Ghedini was a musical architect. His music operates almost like Bruckner with a sense of timing. He has modules and things, and architecture is a sound construction full of really good ideas that he alternates and juxtaposes in various ways that give them color and meaning by assigning them to various orchestral sections. It's a brilliant work. It's a wonder it's not better known. I mean, thank God it was recorded on Naxos. You can hear it, and if you don't know it, give it a shot. You're going to be really happy. There's a whole Ghedini disc out there on Naxos that's really first rate. Also, Malipiero, who wrote bazillion symphonies, which range from pleasant to he got kind of gnarly and chromatic later in his life. But his Impressioni dal vero, Impressions from Life, is another suite of pieces they don't sound like anybody else. They're haunting and mysterious and colorful, and they run the gamut of emotions in incredibly characterful orchestration. And boy, you really need to hear those too. You're going to be real happy. Well, there's Respighi. We have to talk about Respighi, of course, don't we? Metamorphosion. It's tempting, of course, to pick one of the Roman tone poems, but I think we talked about those a lot when we dealt with tone poems. And, Respighi's other orchestral works get very, very little attention. I mentioned the Botticelli pictures and works for chamber orchestra because his pieces for small orchestra and the ancient airs and dances. There's a lot of really, really good stuff. Metamorphosion was one of the commissions for the 50th anniversary of the Boston Symphony. And along with like every other major work of 20th century music, Stravinsky's Symphony of Psalms, Roussel's Third, Honegger's First, Hansen's Romantic Symphony, it's amazing. What a banquet of masterpieces. Hindemith's concert music for strings and brass. You could just go on and on and on and on. The year was 1929, by the way, 50th anniversary of the Boston Symphony. And wow, what a crop of great pieces. And this was one of them. It's sort of like the Enigma Variations goes to Italy. That's what it is. It's a big variation piece. It's got an organ and it's got, Respighi's typically colorful orchestration. It's in modal harmony for the most part. And a little bit more austere than the Roman tone poems. He doesn't go completely crazy with the orchestration, but it's really a lovely, lovely work. And it gets very little attention, although it's gotten quite a few recordings because it's a lovely, lovely work. It deserves to be recorded. Nino Rota, La Strada, the ballet suite. Oh, that's so much fun. It is just so much fun. There's that samba, whatever that thing is in the middle. I got so hung up on that when I first heard it. I couldn't get it out of my head. It's a bountiful effusion of gaiety and color, and well, not all gaiety. It has some very serious moments, but it's got some popular music idioms in it and some other things. It's just the perfect expression of Rota's genius as a chameleon-like film scoring type guy. But he wrote a ton of orchestral music, and it's very, very good, most of it. It's conservative, it's neoclassical, but so what? He knew what he was doing, and he did it extraordinarily well. Listen to this ballet suite. You will not be sorry. And then we'll do a little avant-garde-ish or more stuff. Petrossi, his Concerto for Orchestra No. 3. We've been talking about Petrossi's concerti for orchestra recently. There are 8 of them, and they start in a sort of Hindemith type, Honegger, neoclassical, motoric kind of vein, and then they become spacier and more far out as they go. And it's a very interesting progression. He was a very, very fine composer, serious and dedicated, and he didn't write too much. He worked very hard at each piece, polishing it in whatever way it needed to be polished, and all of his music repays serious attention. I've been listening to a lot of it lately, and I continue to be impressed by just what the serious quality of what he did, even if it's difficult. So what? Sometimes things are difficult. That doesn't mean it's not enjoyable. And Chelsea, Giacinto Chelsea, who was out of his mind. Oh my goodness, he was crazy. He eventually, after having several hundred nervous breakdowns and having an atonal phase and everything else, decided to focus on music that deals with one note at a time. And he takes that one note and he orchestrates it in various extremely strange ways and microtonally varies it and sort of departs and returns to it. And it's really kind of special. For some reason it works. It's kind of scary, actually. A lot of it sounds like expressionistic horror music, and some of it has, zippy Buddhist or Zen or Hindu names or Greek names or things like, Anaplots and Prathapumph and Umpha and I don't know. There's just all these, Grakatak, and you don't know what they are, and it doesn't make any difference. His 4 pieces for orchestra on one note. Each piece has its note, and they're great. They're just terrific. I mean, they don't go anywhere. They don't particularly do anything, but they're fun to listen to. Really cool. I love them. Castelnuovo-Tedesco, his string quartets, all three of them, because they're all on one Naxos disc that I encountered recently. And they're stunning. They're absolutely stunning. Marvelous works that everybody who cares about chamber music or string quartets particularly should hear. I mean, Castelnuovo-Tedesco doesn't get a lot of play normally because he left Italy. He was Jewish, and in the Second World War, he went to Hollywood. He did film music. He wrote lots of things for lots of people, including tons of guitar music. And nobody pays it much attention, but it's good music. He knew what he was doing. It's lovely stuff. And last but not least, another concerto for orchestra, Casella. Now, Casella was a musical chameleon. He began his life as a sort of dyed-in-the-wool, late Romantic, decadent guy who was passionately devoted to Mahler. And Mahler found him his publisher, Universal Edition, which Casella was forever grateful to Mahler for having done. And he arranged the first performance of Mahler's Second Symphony in France, and he made the piano version of, I think, Mahler's Seventh, and he was heavily involved with that stuff. And Mahler was terribly flattered, and Casella outgrew that style and became a neoclassicist, like so many of his Italian colleagues. His career went into eclipse because, like so many of his Italian colleagues, he was a Mussolini supporter during the Second World War, and somewhat, he was opportunistically. Some of them were because none of them were getting any attention. Also, I think his wife was Jewish, so he had some, he had to do something, to try and safeguard her and himself. But in any case, he was a first-class composer who wrote a scad of first-class orchestral music. Really, really good stuff. I mean, you can collect it now. There's 6 or 7 or 8 discs of it floating about. Not all of it, but a lot of it, including 3 symphonies and various other works. But his Concerto for Orchestra is the perfect melding of his neoclassical tendencies and his sort of earlier romantic exuberance. It's just a glorious piece of writing. Fantastically well scored and full of great ideas. And oh my gosh, it's a joy from first note to last. So there are recordings on Naxos and recordings on Chandos. And they're both very good. Probably the Chandos is a bit better, but just give it a listen, and you will be hooked. He's a composer worth exploring. He really is. The music is a discovery, a major discovery. So there you have it. 16 works by 16 different composers. Your list can include multiple works by the same composer, works from my list, as always, whatever you choose. But do me a favor, actually, in this one, assuming you actually watched this video. I should have put this at the beginning and not at the end. Don't tell me whether you agree or disagree with my list or say I would add this to your list. Or don't do that. Make your own list. That's the task for this series. I'm not interested in your opinion of my list. I'm interested in your list. And I think that's true of most of us. So, do your homework. And if you don't have enough things for a list, it doesn't have to be 16. It can only be a couple. Don't make a list. It's okay. You can remain silent. That's a good thing, too. Anyway, here is the list for you to work with and work off of. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.